to Revenge with Lyra.
My name is Claire Jensen. I'm 29 years old, and last spring, I buried my husband in uniform. The flag was still folded on my mantle when I opened the family group chat that night. My hands shook as I typed the words. He's in the ground. My son will never know his father. I stared at the screen, waiting, hoping. Seconds later, the first reply came. Not condolences. Not prayers. Not even silence that meant they were too broken to speak. It was a photo. My aunt on a balcony in Italy. Aperol spritz in hand. The caption. La Dolce Vita. The chat lit up with emojis. Laughter. Vacation snapshots. Another cousin showing off pasta plates. Another flexing by a fountain. Not a single call. Not one word for me. I dropped my phone onto the couch, the weight of it heavier than the folded flag in the corner. My son stirred in the crib, tiny fists clenched, a soft whimper escaping his lips. He would never know his father's voice, his laugh, the way his boots sounded in the hall. And all my family gave me was Italy. The days blurred. Grief doesn't move in straight lines. It carves circles inside your chest. And then, yesterday, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Cold. Flat. Unfeeling. Enough mourning. When will you sell his Jeep? I sat there, breath caught between a sob and a scream. His Jeep. The one vehicle he refused to trade. The one he polished on Sundays before deployments. The one he said he'd teach our son to drive someday. To her, it was just a sale. Just profit. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled back through the chat, capturing every message, every photo, every absence of care. I gathered them like evidence, like a soldier counting ammunition. Then I forwarded the screenshots, all of them, to my husband's unit. And by dusk, the silence broke. 2 black SUVs rolled up to my parents' driveway. Men in uniform stepped out, crisp and unflinching, the kind of men who carry truth like a weapon. For the first time since the funeral, I felt my heartbeat steady. Because this wasn't just grief anymore. This was the beginning of justice. When those SUVs rolled up, it wasn't with sirens or spotlights. It was quiet, deliberate, the kind of presence that made the neighbors peek through blinds, but never step outside. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. A widow holding her child doesn't belong in that kind of theater. But the soldiers who had served with my husband, they showed up. 2 black vehicles, doors opening in sync, boots hitting pavement with precision. My mother texted later, frantic. What have you done? Men in uniform at our door, asking questions. The neighbors saw. For once, I didn't reply. I just rocked my son in the living room, humming the lullaby his father used to whistle, and let the silence speak. From what I heard, the men didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. They carried themselves with the same discipline my husband had, and that alone made every word sting deeper. Ma'am, one of them had said, voice calm but firm, we saw the messages. We saw the neglect. A soldier's sacrifice is not measured in cars or jewelry. It's measured in how his memory is honored. They showed her the screenshots. The Italy photos, the silence after the funeral, the text about selling the Jeep. My mother, who loved hosting charity teas in his name while he lived, had no words when faced with the receipts of her absence. My aunt, the one with her spritz and selfies, tried to laugh it off. It was just bad timing. We were grieving in our own way. But grief doesn't look like wine glasses and fountains. And the men made sure she knew it. When the SUVs finally pulled away, my family didn't post about it. They didn't dare. But I heard from a cousin later that the neighbors whispered for days. Why were military cars outside their house? What did they do? And that was the point. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't fought. I hadn't even raised my voice. I had just shown them what silence can do when it carries truth. That night, I sat by the Jeep in the garage, running my hand along its worn steering wheel. My son cooed from his carrier, and I whispered to him, "Your father's not here." But his brothers made sure his name is still louder than their noise. For the first time since the funeral, I believed it. Grief exposes people. Some grow softer. Others grow crueler. My family chose cruelty. The week after the SUV showed up, my mother tried to claw her way back into control. She posted on Facebook a long, trembling paragraph about how I had turned against family in her darkest hour, about how outsiders were interfering in private matters. She ended it with, "All I asked was for the Jeep to be put to good use." Instead, I was humiliated in front of my neighbors. The comments flooded in. Some sympathized with her, but others weren't so forgiving. Veterans, widows, strangers who had seen the screenshots once the soldiers leaked them. One woman wrote, "My husband never came home either. Don't you dare minimize a soldier's legacy to car keys and real estate." Another, "Claire, you don't owe anyone an apology. That Jeep belongs to your son as much as his father's name does." For once, I didn't feel alone.
But my family doubled down.
My aunt, still sunburned from her Italian vacation, went live on Instagram, glass of red wine in hand. She rolled her eyes and said, "Everyone grieves differently. Some of us take trips. Some of us make drama." Drama. That's what she called my husband's funeral. I should have fired back. Typed something, called her. Maybe even screamed. But instead, I looked at my son asleep in his crib, one hand curled around the edge of his blanket, and realized, not every battle deserves a voice. Silence was becoming my sharpest weapon. So, I sent another file. Not to the family this time, but to the Veterans Association. Screenshots, texts, timelines. Within days, an article appeared in their newsletter. "When families fail, a widow's strength amid neglect." My name wasn't even mentioned, just the facts laid bare. And slowly, the narrative shifted. My family's posts started gathering fewer likes. Their friends stopped chiming in. The silence of their supporters grew heavier than any insult they threw my way. At dinner that night, I sat alone with a plate of pasta I barely touched. I stared at the Jeep parked in the garage through the window. Its headlights caught the glow of the street lamp, almost like eyes watching over us. And I thought, what happens when silence doesn't just protect you, but exposes them? I was beginning to find out. It was a gray Saturday morning when the knock came. Not polite. Not hesitant. Hard, insistent thuds that rattled the doorframe. I already knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. My mother. Coat draped over her shoulders, lips tight, eyes sharp. She didn't come alone. My aunt hovered behind her, phone in hand, ready to document whatever scene unfolded. I opened the door only halfway, just enough to see the storm in their faces. "Claire," my mother said, voice brittle. "We're done with this nonsense. Give us the Jeep keys. Your father and I will handle the sale. You need to stop clinging to ghosts." Behind her, my aunt smirked, already angling her phone like she was filming a spectacle for her friends. For a moment, grief boiled up, so strong I thought I might shatter right there. But then I glanced over my shoulder. In the corner of the living room, tucked into his playpen, my son was babbling to himself, waving a toy truck in the air. His hair caught the morning light. His father's hair. His father's truck. His father's Jeep. I turned back to the doorway, spine straightening.
No.
My mother blinked, as if the word was foreign. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. Calm, steady, final. "That Jeep is not for sale. It's not yours to touch. It belongs to him." I nodded toward my son. The silence that followed was thick. My aunt's smirk faltered, the phone lowering just a fraction. My mother's eyes hardened, but there was something else behind them too, the faintest flicker of realization that her grip on me was gone. She hissed, "You're making a fool of this family. Of me." I leaned against the frame, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut. "You did that yourself. The day you cared more about Italy than your grandson's father." Her breath caught, her face pale. For once, she had no script ready. I closed the door slowly, the final click echoing louder than any argument. Inside, I scooped my son into my arms. He laughed, pressing the toy truck against my cheek, and I whispered, "Don't worry, baby. Daddy's Jeep stays. Always." Outside, footsteps retreated down the walkway. For the first time, it wasn't me walking away.
It was them.
And the Jeep, silent in the garage, stood like a sentinel, a wall they could never climb. The door slam should have ended it, but my family never let endings breathe. By Monday, my mother had gone public again, this time with a post dripping in self-pity. A photo of her standing outside my house, captioned, "Try to help my daughter move forward, but she shut us out. Grief has made her cruel." The comments swarmed. Old family friends sympathized. "So sad. Poor Daniel's mother." Others sent prayers, hearts, pity emojis. She played the victim so well she almost convinced herself. Almost. Because hours later, another post surfaced. Not mine. Not hers. Someone from my husband's unit. A single photo, the Jeep parked in my garage, an American flag folded neatly on the dashboard. Captioned, "Some legacies don't get sold. They get protected." It spread fast. Faster than her pity post. Veterans shared it. Military wives reposted it. Strangers left comments that burned through the lies. "Your daughter isn't cruel. She's stronger than most of us. That Jeep belongs to her boy. Period." Family who abandons in grief loses the right to speak on it. For once, I didn't have to defend myself. Others carried the weight for me. That night, I sat in the garage, engine off, just breathing inside the Jeep's quiet space. My son slept in his carrier beside me, his tiny breath steady, safe. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and leather, the scent of weekends my husband used to spend here, polishing every curve until it gleamed. I whispered into the silence, "They can't touch this. Not anymore." But deep down, I knew desperation makes people reckless. And I wasn't wrong. 2 days later, my aunt messaged me, a single line meant to sting. "Do you really think a car keeps his memory alive? It's just metal." I almost replied, almost gave her the satisfaction of my anger. But instead, I saved the screenshot, added it to the folder already thick with their words, their silence, their cruelty. Evidence stacked like bricks around me. Because if they wanted a war of words, they would get something far worse, a mirror. And soon, the world would see their reflection as clearly as I did. The cracks in their image began to spread. By now, my mother's posts weren't drawing sympathy. They were drawing scrutiny. Neighbors whispered. Old church friends stopped replying. The Italy photos, the Jeep demands, the screenshots, they were out there living their own truth beyond her control. One evening, I received a message from a woman I'd never met. Her profile picture showed her in scrubs, hospital badge clipped to her collar. "Claire, I lost my husband in Afghanistan. When my in-laws turned cold, his brothers stood by me. I just wanted to say thank you for showing the world what silence can expose." I sat with that message for a long time, tears staining my cheeks, not from sadness this time, but from recognition. My pain wasn't isolated. My story was theirs too. The next blow came from within their own circle. A local veterans group posted publicly, "It is a disgrace when a soldier's sacrifice is reduced to property disputes. We stand with Claire and her son." The post caught fire. My mother's pity campaign shriveled under the weight of men and women in uniform calling her out. The screenshots, comments, stories, the community turned. And still, I hadn't spoken a word. That weekend, my cousin, one of the few who had stayed silent, called me in a whisper. "Claire, they're panicking. Grandma asked why soldiers were at their door, and now everyone in the family knows. They don't know how to spin this anymore." I sat in the Jeep, running my hand along the dashboard, feeling its cool surface under my fingertips. "They don't need to spin it," I said softly. The truth already did the work. The following Sunday, I passed my parents' house on the way to the store. Curtains drawn. No cars in the driveway. The proud house that once hosted barbecues and Christmas dinners now looked like it was hiding. My son babbled from the car seat in the back, his tiny voice filling the silence. I glanced at him through the mirror and thought, this is the legacy his father left. Not a Jeep. Not arguments. Strength. And in that moment I realized my revenge wasn't about making them hurt. It was about making sure his memory stood taller than their neglect. And it already did. Desperation has a way of making people louder. And when my family felt the walls closing in, they screamed. It started with another post from my mother, a shaky video, filmed at her kitchen table. Her voice trembled as she said, "My daughter turned the military against her own family. We only wanted to help her move on, but she punished us. This is not who we are." My aunt sat beside her, nodding, glass of wine in frame. They thought they were reclaiming the narrative. They thought pity would erase truth. But within hours, the comments filled with fire. "You left her alone at her husband's funeral. Grief isn't punished, neglect is. Respect the Jeep, respect the sacrifice, respect the widow." And then came the moment I hadn't planned for but quietly prayed would happen. The unit itself, my husband's brothers in arms, released a statement. Not a long one, not dramatic. Just a single photo, a row of soldiers standing in front of the Jeep in my garage, saluting. Caption: "He may be gone, but his family is not alone." It went viral. Thousands of shares. News outlets picked it up, veterans' pages reposted it, and suddenly, the story wasn't about my mother's video. It was about loyalty, legacy, honor. I sat on the couch that night, my son asleep against my chest, watching the video loop across social media feeds. My phone buzzed endlessly with strangers' words, encouragement, solidarity, stories of their own losses. And then, silence. My mother's video vanished. My aunt's page went private. Their voices, so sharp for months, had finally gone quiet. It wasn't because I fought. It wasn't because I shouted. It was because I didn't. Sometimes, the sharpest revenge is letting the truth echo louder than any excuse. As I placed my son gently in his crib, I whispered to him. They tried to erase him with silence. But now the world knows his name louder than ever. And in the glow of the baby monitor, for the first time, I didn't feel like a widow carrying weight. I felt like a soldier who had won. The first snow fell the day the hospital wing was dedicated. Not just any wing, the pediatric unit, named after my husband. His photo hung at the entrance. Uniform pressed, smile steady, eyes bright. I stood there with my son in my arms, his tiny hand reaching for the frame, and I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, it always would be, but it no longer hollowed me out. It built something instead. The unit commander spoke softly into the microphone. Sergeant Jensen's sacrifice did not end with his passing. His legacy stands here today, protecting children, healing families. Applause filled the hall. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wrap around me like armor. When I got home that evening, my phone buzzed again. A new message. From my mother. Just 2 words. "We're sorry." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The apology wasn't for me. It was for themselves, a desperate attempt to reclaim dignity after they had already lost it. I walked into the garage instead. The Jeep sat there, still and steady, the folded flag resting on the passenger seat. I slid behind the wheel, my son giggling in my lap, and turned the ignition. The engine roared alive, deep and familiar, like his voice calling us home. Headlights cut through the snow in twin beams, and for a moment, I imagined him beside me, hand on the shifter, grin on his face. And I realized I hadn't just kept a car. I had kept a promise. A promise that his memory wouldn't be sold, or silenced, or stripped down for someone else's comfort. Outside, the world might still whisper. My family might still sulk in their quiet houses. But here, in this Jeep, in this life I was building for my son, his father's name lived on. Justice hadn't come with shouting. It hadn't come with confrontation. It came with silence that grew louder than their noise. It came with truth that needed no defense. It came with a legacy no one could sell. And as I parked beneath the falling snow, holding my son close, I knew one thing for certain.